Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our channel, where we explore the truths hidden in the shadows of history. Today, we journey past the gleaming marble temples of Athens into the darkness to uncover the tragic, untold story of a young boy whose beauty became his curse, and how the very society that celebrated art and philosophy systematically destroyed his humanity. Before we begin, if you believe these forgotten stories deserve to be told, please take a moment to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. It truly helps our community grow and ensures these narratives reach a wider audience. We'd also love to hear from you in the comments. And now, let us begin our story. You think you know ancient Greece? Let me show you what lies hidden beneath that marble veneer. When we think of ancient Greece, our minds tend to paint magnificent pictures. We see philosophers in white robes strolling through olive groves as they passionately debate the nature of virtue and truth. We see the majestic Parthenon standing proudly atop the Acropolis, an eternal testament to human genius and aesthetic aspiration. We see the cradle of democracy where free citizens gather to decide the fate of their city-state, laying the foundations for Western political systems to come. History has cloaked Greece in a golden mantle woven from knowledge, art, and enlightenment. But beneath that splendid robe, hidden behind the stately marble columns and the eloquent discourses, existed another world. A world of shadows, of shackles, and of silent agony. A world built upon the sacrifice of nameless lives, of bodies turned into commodities, and of souls crushed like shattered pottery. The brilliant civilization we so admire was watered and nourished by the sweat, tears, and blood of millions of slaves. This story is not about the great philosophers or the celebrated generals. It is an attempt to listen to the echoes buried within the marble stones, to recount one of the countless tragedies that history has deliberately forgotten. This is the story of a boy, a male concubine, a living plaything in the hands of those called the elite of society. This is a journey through a terrestrial hell, a hell adorned with exquisite art and rationalized by lofty philosophical ideas. Let us set aside for a moment the familiar images of an aesthetic and rational ancient Greece, and step together into the dark cellar where a human life began and ended in despair. Before he became property, he was a child. Remember that. Remember the sky he once had. Before the cold stone walls became the only world he knew, the boy had once had a sky. His sky was a vast, deep blue expanse, stretching over the rugged mountains of wild Arcadia. The air there carried the scent of pine resin, wild thyme, and damp earth after a rain. His life was woven from simple things, the clear laughter of shepherd boys echoing across the hillsides, the honeyed sweetness of a fig plucked straight from the tree, the rough but warm texture of sheep's wool beneath his fingers, and his mother's embrace each night by the flickering hearth. His family was not wealthy. Their home was a mud and wattle hut with a packed earth floor and a thatched roof. Their greatest assets were a few dozen goats in a small terraced field where his father bent his back to cultivate barley. But they had each other. His father, a stern man with hands as gnarled as oak bark, would tell him stories of the gods and heroes on Mount Olympus. His mother, a woman with kind eyes and a smile tinged with weariness, would sing ancient lullabies while her hands deftly spun wool. He had brothers, playful wrestling matches in the grass, and childish dreams of one day becoming a warrior as mighty as Achilles. Life, though harsh, was whole and dignified. Then disaster struck, not in the form of an invading army or mythological beast, but as a deathly silence from the sky. The drought began. For weeks, then months, the sun was a fiery eye, scorching all life. The barley fields turned a sickly brown, crisp and brittle underfoot. The ancient olive trees, which had sustained generations, now offered only gnarled branches and shriveled, bitter fruit. The stream where the children used to bathe was now just a dry, stony bed. The village well, the lifeblood of the community, ran low, yielding only a thick, murky sludge. Desperation began to creep into every home, like a poisonous vine. First, his family sold their goats, their most precious possession, for a few sacks of grain. The sound of their bleating as they were led away was a mournful lament. Then came his mother's few pieces of jewelry, heirlooms from her own mother, which also disappeared one by one. When everything that could be sold was gone, and hunger remained a wild beast gnawing at them day after day, his parents began to look at their children with different eyes, eyes that held a mixture of profound love and heart-wrenching pain. The slave traders arrived at precisely the right moment, like vultures sensing a carcass. They came not with swords and violence, but with scrolls of parchment, bags of silver, and words as sweet as poisoned honey. They set up a tent in the village square, displaying gleaming iron chains and ledgers filled with names and prices. They offered a solution, a 20-year service contract in exchange for enough silver to see a family through the harsh winter. 20 years sounded like a reasonable, even noble sacrifice when your younger siblings were literally starving. The boy was 12 years old. He did not understand the complex mathematics of desperation. He only saw his father, the strongest man he knew, avoiding his gaze as he negotiated the price of his own son. He only saw his mother turn away, her shoulders trembling, as the trader pried open his mouth to inspect his teeth and felt his muscles as if he were a young colt. Words like promising, good stock, and suitable for household service floated around him, but their meaning was still too distant. Finally, the bargain was struck. The trader counted out gleaming silver coins into his father's trembling palm. Each cold piece of metal represented a year of his youth, a year of the sky he would never see again. His father clenched the money, but its weight seemed to crush his very soul. His mother covered her face and wept, but she did not stop the transaction. They told him it was temporary, that he would go earn money and return a wealthy man, able to buy his own land and take a wife. They promised he would be treated well, that he would learn valuable skills, that this was an opportunity for a better life. The lies dripped from their lips, sweet but venomous. He believed them, or tried to, because belief was the only thing he had left. As the first cold iron shackle closed around his neck, linking him to a long line of other boys, he looked back one last time. The figures of his parents grew smaller, blurring through dust and tears until they were just a speck, and then nothing at all. His sky had been sold. A price was paid, a soul was sold. But the journey to hell is never a short one. The journey to Athens was a prolonged nightmare, measured in the chafing of chains that rubbed skin raw and the blisters that burst under his feet. The boy was now part of a human caravan, a chain of young bodies linked together by iron and despair. The older boys, those who had walked this path before, rarely spoke. Their eyes were hollow, having already learned the bitter lesson that hope was just another word for future disappointment. Only the youngest, those who still remembered their mother's scent, cried until their voices gave out, or until the overseer's whips lashed across their backs, silencing both the sound and the last vestiges of defiance. The procession trudged through landscapes that, in another context, might have been beautiful. Rolling hills covered in lush olive groves, coastal roads where the sea sparkled like a million scattered diamonds, and mountain passes where eagles soared on the wind. But the boy saw none of it. His world had shrunk to the length of chain between him and the boy in front, to the monotonous rhythm of feet on stone, and to the growing, chilling certainty that he would never see home again. At night they were chained to stakes driven deep into the ground. Lying curled on the cold earth, the boy listened to the muffled sobs of his companions in the darkness. The weight of the iron collar on his neck felt like a yoke of fate, a constant reminder of his new identity. Sometimes the traders would bring visitors to inspect the merchandise. These were men with soft hands, fine clothes, and cold, calculating eyes. They walked among the rows of slaves, prodding and poking, checking for signs of disease or injury like farmers examining livestock. The boy soon learned to distinguish the different types of buyers. Those seeking slaves for their farms looked for brawn and endurance. They wanted bodies that could toil in the fields from dawn till dusk. The masters seeking household servants looked for different qualities: compliance, a hint of intelligence, and a certain fragile appearance that suggested they wouldn't cause trouble. But there was a third category of buyer, and their visits were the most terrifying of all. These men were dressed in the finest garments, smelling of expensive perfumes and wine. When they examined the boy, their fingers lingered on his skin in a way that made him shudder with revulsion. Their eyes were not looking for labor, but for something else, a combination of youth and beauty, something that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with pleasure. The boy didn't fully understand, but an instinctual fear rose in his chest. He tried to shrink away, to make himself invisible, but it was useless. In this world, beauty was not a gift, but a curse. What is a human being worth? In Athens, they had an exact price for that. Let us go to the market where dignity is weighed in silver. The slave market in Athens was an assault on every sense. First came the sound, a chaotic cacophony of hundreds of voices, haggling, commanding, crying, pleading. Next came the smell, a thick, nauseating stench of unwashed bodies, of fear, of sweat, of urine, and something else, a sour, foul odor he couldn't identify, which made his stomach churn. And then he saw it, and he understood why the older slaves had warned him to keep his eyes down. Hundreds of naked bodies arranged on wooden platforms like merchandise in a shop. Children barely old enough to walk stood beside their mothers, their eyes wide with confusion. Old men with broken spirits and stooped backs, their value measured in the last dregs of strength in their aging muscles. And everywhere, the buyers circled like sharks, pointing and discussing prices directly in front of the people being sold, as if they were inanimate objects. The boy was washed and oiled before being put on the block. Not out of kindness, but because clean, gleaming merchandise fetched a higher price. The olive oil made his skin shine in the sunlight, highlighting the lean, graceful lines of his body. Someone had decided he was too pretty for field work, and he was placed with the household slaves, those destined for indoor service. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the market, describing his attributes: his age, his region of origin, his physical condition. The man made special mention of his pleasing appearance and gentle temperament, code words that made certain buyers lean forward with interest. The bidding began. The numbers were called out, rising higher and higher. The boy stood frozen on the platform, trying to disappear into himself, shrinking away as strange, rough hands prodded his body, forced open his mouth, and tested the strength of his limbs. He was no longer a person. He was an object being appraised. The winning bidder was a man named Lysander. The boy wouldn't learn his name until much later. At that moment, all he saw was the man's self-satisfied smile as he counted out the silver, and his eyes that possessed the boy long before the transaction was complete. Lysander was middle-aged, with the paunch of a man who had never performed manual labor, and hands that were suspiciously soft. His tunic was dyed a deep, luxurious purple, the color of wealth and status. The way he looked at the boy made him want to run, even though he knew the chains made it impossible. A new, darker chapter of his life was about to begin. The highest bidder won. But what did he win? Not a home, but a new kind of prison, one with beautiful walls and silent screams. Lysander's villa was located in the wealthiest district of Athens, a sprawling complex that could have swallowed the boy's entire home village. Marble columns soared towards the sky, walls were adorned with intricate frescoes of gods and heroes, and floors were laid with elaborate mosaics. Slaves and servants scurried through the corridors, their movements quick and nervous. The boy noticed that many of them were young men, each beautiful in his own way, but all sharing the same look of resigned despair. It was the face of captivity. The man who took charge of him was an overseer named Demetrius. He himself had once been a slave, bought young, and had clawed his way up to his current position through a combination of intelligence, ruthlessness, and absolute loyalty to his master. Now he ruled the household slaves with an iron fist, understanding better than anyone how to break spirits and ensure compliance. As Demetrius led the boy through the villa, his voice was flat and cold as he explained the rules. You will be fed twice a day, barley porridge in the morning, bread and olives in the evening. You will be given clean clothes once a week. You will bathe when ordered, eat when ordered, sleep when ordered. You will speak only when spoken to. You will never look a free person directly in the eye. And most importantly, he paused, staring directly at the boy, you will never refuse an order, no matter what that order may be. Then came the part that made the blood freeze in the boy's veins. You are here to serve the master and his guests in whatever capacity they require. This service may involve pouring wine, cleaning, or providing entertainment. Demetrius smiled a cruel smile. The nature of that entertainment you will soon understand. He continued as if reading the fear in the boy's eyes. Some of them resist at first, but resistance only leads to pain. Compliance, on the other hand, can lead to certain privileges. Better food, a warmer place to sleep, perhaps a few small personal possessions. The boys' new quarters were in a cellar beneath the house, a series of small, windowless cells. Each cell contained nothing more than a straw mattress, a thin blanket, and a chamber pot. The thick stone walls were designed to muffle all sound. The boy quickly learned why this was necessary. The other slaves welcomed him with a mixture of sympathy and warning. There was Marcus, a boy his own age who had been there for 2 years, his eyes holding a depth of pain that seemed impossible for one so young. There was Alexios, older and scarred, who told him in whispered conversations about the special guests and what they expected from the entertainment. And there was Philemon, barely 14, but with the haunted expression of an old man who explained what truly happened during the symposiums. Philemon had been the son of a small merchant family. When his father's business failed, creditors seized everything, including the children. He had been in this house for 6 months. The Symposium, Philemon whispered in the dark of their cell, is not a place for philosophical debate. It is a stage for demons.